Well, there has been some mammoth-sized news for the Utah Hockey Club this week, and we got to break this down because out of the blue, really, we had this fan vote for the team name show up again. And it seems like there was an obvious huge omission. There was a brand new inclusion. And then a couple days later, we had controversy and had to add back in a fan favorite name. This is the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast, all things Utah Hockey Club, which we won't be calling them that potentially anymore, but we will have to see. And we have Clean Hits Corey. This is Clean Hits Brad. And then, of course, we got KSL Sports' very own Cole Babgley joining us today to talk about, again, this mammoth-sized news. And we need to jump right into this, I think, because I feel like this is really top of mind for a lot of the Utah SLC fans out there. We had three options one day: the Utah Mammoth, keeping the Utah Hockey Club, and then the Wasatch out of nowhere. That one came out of the blue. And then after a home game where fans are allowed to come in and start voting for their favorite, which Mammoth was winning by a landslide, a Tusk-sized landslide, they added back in the Utah Outlaws. And personally, right now, I have it up to here with Outlaws because we were supposed to record this episode last Friday, and I got the news that one of the homes that I've been working on and remodeling, part of the hustle out here, had been broken into by some outlaws. So we had to postpone this. So I have a huge bias here, but I'd love to hear how you guys think about the names. But also, we got to toss it up. It's a Sunday. We're recording it. How's everybody's weekend doing? Corey, how you doing?
Hey, so far so good. Game day 2 against St. Louis Blues here, and you look at the playoff race, 6 points out, right in the mix with St. Louis. So this is a must-win game to keep those playoff hopes alive.
Yes, and we will be talking about tonight's game and kind of this upcoming stretch before the Four Nations tournament and the 2-week break that the NHL will have. Cole, Mr. Babgley, how are you doing? Is it just chatter everywhere about the names in SLC right now, or?
Yeah, I mean it's the talk of the town.
Yep.
You know, I've worked something like 65 plus hours this week, and we got another hockey game tonight. So definitely, it's a good week. I mean, I can't really complain. I'm probably a sicko that enjoys that I've worked that much, but at the same time, I'm still pretty tired. But no, it's been fun. It's been good, but man, this team needs a win tonight and on Tuesday to try to salvage about 6 points on a 4-game homestand if they can, if they want to, continue to push for the playoffs.
Yeah, yes, very much agreed. And like I mentioned, we will break down kind of this recent stretch of games along with today's game against St. Louis. And again, those games coming up before that break. But it does seem like there's been a ton of energy in the Delta Center during those last 2 home games. You could feel it. And I think it has to be slightly from this whole decision that the fans hold to name their favorite team. And, a lot of these options were ones that had been brought up since the team kind of was announced to be coming to Salt Lake and Utah. I think Mammoth is the one that is the least surprising to see on the initial ballot. I think Outlaws was the second least surprising, but it did not make the initial ballot. I think Utah Hockey Club was something that many didn't really think they would see, but more importantly, the Wasatch idea kind of came out of the blue, and it does sound like that was a lot of ways to kind of recycle what they had been building for kind of the fan favorite Yeti name. Corey, which way do you lean here?
I mean, going into this whole process way back when the team really first arrived in Utah, Yeti was top of my list. I mean, I know there's no local connection there, but it just rolled off the tongue well. You go back to Ryan Smith's comments about it bringing the U and the Y together. You look at like this snow branding they're building up, the color scheme, the Yeti fits with that. But then when they ran into this complication with the cooler company, and through this whole process as well, Mammoth has always kind of been my, not even number two, kind of like a 1B. And the advantage with Mammoth over Yeti is at least there's a local connection there, right? You look at Utah and the Mammoth fossils and remains and those sorts of things that have been found in the state. You look at the play on words as well with Mammoth, Utah. I think it's the 12th largest state in terms of square footage. You look at the team that Bill Armstrong is building with Daniil Boot and Maverick Lamoureux and some Mammoth players as well. So it fits there as well. So, I mean, if I was voting, I can't vote because I'm not at the games, but I would be voting for Mammoth.
Yeah, I am kind of right there with you. I think I'd be voting for Mammoth as well, given the options. Cole, where do you stand on the naming controversy, if you will?
Yeah, Yeti was my kind of my original favorite, and as well, I really liked Outlaws. I would even say that Mammoth was kind of number 3 for me back when all this started. But just based on kind of like Corey was talking about, they're very big into Utah. They're very big into the mountains and snow. You look at the colors. The colors go perfectly along with that. The blue, the black, and the white. And a lot of the graphics and marketing that they've done have revolved around that. If you go to the game tonight, there's going to be a pregame graphic with the Utah Hockey Club logo and the St. Louis logo inside an ice cave, and then pregame they make it snow. And for me, Outlaws is cool. There is some historical prevalence with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and Utah is somewhat of the Old West, but not as much as places like Texas or Arizona or Nevada. That to me is more where Outlaws fits. And so I've really actually come around to Mammoth. A lot of the mock-ups that I've seen look really, really good. I think it looks a lot better with the colors. You could take any of those mock-up Mammoths. You guys have shared a lot of them. You could put those on the jerseys right now, and I don't think anybody would complain. It feels more fierce than an Outlaw. And as well, with how much, there's historical prevalence there as well. They found a lot of fossils and remains of mammoths who used to live near the ancient Lake Bonneville, which was a majority of the Salt Lake area, thousands of years ago. So I've come around to Team Mammoth. I have yet to see a mock-up of the Outlaw in the colors that looks good. It's just, if the colors were different, maybe Outlaws would be a better option. But just based on what we've got, I really, really like Mammoth. Based off what I've seen all 3 logos that they have mocked up, which they're in preliminary stages. What they're showing fans now is not what the final product would be. But, I posted, kind of my thoughts, and the Outlaw logo was 3rd by a mile. Mammoth was really cool. I would say that Mammoth and actually the Utah Hockey Club logo were pretty close. But if I'm leaning any way, I would definitely go with Mammoth.
Yeah, and we had a kind of a mock-up. I'm showing it here if you're watching us on YouTube. Good. Yeah, of Keller in the kind of one of the Mammoth logos that have been kind of floating around on the interwebs. I believe this one was done by a Twitter friend, Captain Cook. So we had to pop it up on the jersey and kind of get an in action view of that kind of profile of a mammoth. There's a lot to do, and it seems like you can go a little bit more maybe minimalist with the mammoth itself, or you can go a little bit more high detail with kind of just the intricacies of it all. I think there's a lot of fun you can have with obviously the mascot. If it was a big woolly mammoth, we've also been talking about if we had like a caveman style mascot as well. The Clean Hits crew.
I feel like you could use the tusks to play with like a U, right? Like,
yes,
I like the simplicity of that there. But when you think of some of the more new logos for the expansion teams like Seattle or Vegas, they're simple, but they're also intricate. There's a lot of symbolism in there. With Seattle, there's the S, there's the anchor, there's the eye of the beast. With Vegas, it's very simple as well, but there's the V for Vegas. Like, if we go with Mammoth, which I hope they do, you got to work in something with the tusks and playing with Utah. And something I'd also like to see, if they do end up going with Mammoth and they get an outdoor game, put some tusks on the sides of a of a blue helmet for me, similar to what the Detroit Red
Yeah.
Wings are doing with their helmets. I just think there's so much more. It's just so much more marketable to both adults and children. And it just, I mean, that mock-up that you just showed, like, I would buy one of those today. Like, it just looks so much better than anything I've seen with Outlaws.
And we can't forget about the tusks up either, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, there's a lot to love. I mean, even like, how the San Jose Sharks come out of a giant shark head. You could have, I mean, maybe a mammoth head or tusks coming out of the ice would be kind of cool. There just seems to be a lot to do with it. Now, I will say with Outlaws, there's some fun options too. I think you can work with the music quite a bit, maybe kind of having fun with the goal song or goal horn. There's definitely a lot, kind of almost infinite ideas rather than being kind of pigeonholed into, the Ice Age and whatnot. But again, thematically, I think the Mammoth area and the sound of it sounds good. And I just kind of like the vibe more.
I think you can do everything with Mammoth, whereas Outlaws, you might be able to have more fun with kind of the in-game presentation. You could nickname Delta Center the Saloon or the Hideout. You could have, a train horn as the goal horn. You could nickname the penalty box Jail. Those kinds of things. Rally towels could be bandanas. But I feel like that's the only dimension of Outlaw that's really unique and cool. Whereas I feel like Mammoth encompasses everything. Just from what potential logos could be to just inserting it into the branding that they already have immediately. And you could, I mean, you can't tell me that a Mammoth breaking the ice in their pregame, little show wouldn't be absolutely awesome.
Yes.
Like, I just think there's so much more depth to Mammoth than there is to Outlaw.
Yeah, to me, Outlaws just seems a little bit generic, like something if you're going to create a team on an NHL video game or something, kind of like Cole was saying, it can apply to Texas, it can apply to Nevada, it can apply to Arizona, where how many states can claim the Mammoth nickname? So I think that really works with Utah. And just to show that I am, full team Mammoth at this point, fresh off the Amazon truck today.
Wow.
So we are all in. Yeah.
Invested already.
And man, all in, right? Can't change the name.
I think Mammoth goes more along with NHL names too, like the Anaheim Ducks, the San Jose Sharks, the Seattle Kraken, the Boston Bruins, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Utah Mammoth. Like that to me just fits a lot better than Utah Outlaws. Like I don't know, I'm just not crazy about it.
Yeah. Now, one thing for the Outlaw side, we were kind of in the group chat talking about it a little bit. I love the San Antonio Spurs logo, and that's hard to say as somebody from Phoenix that's a Suns fan too, but that kind of minimalist imagery around kind of that Southwest feel using the spur and everything, there definitely are opportunities to do Outlaw right. I think I'd be really concerned of nailing it though. I think it's the chances of getting Mammoth knocked out of the park to me are much higher than Outlaw. Nobody like, I'm from Utah. Nobody has ever thought that like we are like a state that's known for Outlaws. Like Butch Cassidy was born down in southern Utah, and they're they did spend some time here and stuff like that. But like it's just so much more a Nevada or an Arizona or a Texas thing. Like that's where all of those things happen. Nobody ever identifies with Outlaws in Utah. I mean, yes, there is prevalence, but it's like, come on. And not that people are always like, we're always talking about mammoths here, but it's just like you were saying, Corey, we're one of one of few states that could claim mammoth as something which is very unique and different, and just to me just feels more like fans could really grasp onto that one.
Yeah, you look at Ryan Smith has described Utah as kind of the Silicon Slopes state now, right? Where it's kind of has this new image, and to throw back to the Butch Cassidy era seems a little bit of a strange pivot away from that. And beyond that too, you can't do the Outlaws with the current color scheme. So what does that open the door to? Are you going like with a red motif or gold or something like that, where beyond already being kind of bought in with this winter theme, there's no other team in the league that uses this powder blue color. So I think it's really unique, and I think it's a really cool opportunity to stick with that.
For sure.
Yeah. Agreed. And now, do you feel like this is a mass pivot by the team that was potentially really hoping for it to be Yeti, or do you get the feeling that maybe they have been juggling a couple ideas around, since the team has come over?
I know that Yeti was the primary focus.
Okay.
That's what they were planning on. That's what they wanted it to be. But this is an organization that's well prepared, and I know that they had, backup plans, if you will, because you have
Yeah.
to. I mean,
Yeah.
with the intricacies of trademarking and copyright and all those types of things, like Yeti was going to be difficult from day one. And while they were hopeful to get a deal done and worked effortlessly to try to get Yeti coolers in on it, and even called the NHL, who has a deal with Yeti coolers, to step in and see if they could help. Ultimately, Yeti coolers was not interested, which meant they had to
Huh.
pivot. Yeah, that's why they, submitted Wasatch. They directly said, look, this Wasatch idea was kind of a way to still integrate Yeti. The logo for Wasatch was a Yeti, but just the naming of it, and yes, it's very Utah, but it's just not something that like people from Utah are like going out of state and being like, oh, you ever heard of the Wasatch Mountains? Like
Yeah.
that's just not something that we, yes, we're proud of our mountains. We're proud of our,
Mm-hmm.
the Silicon Slopes and the snow and all of that. But it's just not something that is super overly Utah. And it sounds terrible. Like Utah Wasatch, like, come on. So it was very quickly a dud, based on conversations that were had at the arena and the results of the first voting, at the game against the Penguins. And I mean, they were, these guys were monitoring social media, and it was very clear that nobody wanted Wasatch and they
Yeah.
wanted Outlaws. So they, held to their word and switched out Outlaws, which I commend them for. I think you want a closer race. You want something,
Yeah.
that gives people something to get behind. And to be honest with you, the way people have been acting with this voting, I feel like they're taking it more seriously than they took the general, U.S. president election here. It's, people are like, they're camping outside Delta Center. They've got
Wow.
signs. They're doing chants. And the lines were super long. People were showing up in cowboy hats. People were showing up in mammoth suits. Like,
Yeah.
this is the vote of the century for the state of Utah.
Oh, that's awesome. And again, you can feel that energy in those last two home games where the voting was happening. Unfortunately, the Utah Hockey Club lost in overtime against the Penguins and Blue Jackets. Same exact score, 3-2 for overtime loss for both of those games. But watching from a distance, I mean, it felt electric in there both games, and a lot of our friends and fans that are in the Clean Hits Discord were talking about how just electric the stadium or rink has been the past two games. You could kind of feel it coming out of your speakers. I feel like both of those games, you really thought that Utah was going to be able to kind of pull through and make that push and win. Unfortunately, however, they only come out with 1 point for both of those games, and their losing streak is now 4 games in a row, having just beaten 3 division rivals for 3 straight wins. The continual roller coaster of the Utah Hockey Club season has continued. Cole, how are you feeling as we inch our way closer and closer to a 2-week-long Four Nation Faceoff break?
I think Utah may have the greatest opportunity to benefit from this break.
Yeah.
With Logan Cooley going down, Dursey and Gunther approaching returns, this team, they're still there. Like, that's what's crazy. They're still in that mix. They're still in the hunt. They're only 6 points behind Calgary. They're in the fourth spot right now. They do have a point over St. Louis, which makes tonight's game, really, really important. They cannot mess around. They've got to find a way to get these points. This break comes at a good time. Obviously, this next stretch going into the break is critical. I think they have to kind of maintain within that 5 to 6 point range of the of the race if they really want to make a push afterwards. But yeah, it's going to come at a good time. Gunther and Dersey yesterday were practicing in regular jerseys, so that's always a good sign, right? I mean, generally when they shed the non-contact, it means they're within a few weeks of a return. They have not ruled out Dylan Gunther returning before the Four Nations. Honestly, I would anticipate seeing him before then. I don't know that it's going to be too long before we see Dersey back either. And they said they'd reevaluate Logan Cooley after the Four Nations. So yeah, it's as poorly as this team has played at home, as poorly as they've played over the last week and a half. They're still in it. There's still chance. There's still hope. It's very thin margin of error, and the guys are certainly getting frustrated, as you could see from Mikhail Sergachev breaking his stick last game against against the team, and with the way that they've kind of handled interviews lately, you can they're wearing their feelings on their sleeves a little bit. So we'll see how they respond, but it's going to come at a good time, because if they can stay within that 5-6 point range of a playoff spot, get back 3 massive players within the next 4 to 6 weeks, they have a legitimate shot to make a push.
I think that's the craziest thing with this team this year. Now we're 50 something games in, and we still haven't seen the full team, right? Marino was out up until a couple of weeks ago. Dersey only played the first 4 games of the year. Now we don't have Cooley. Now we don't have Gunther. Still don't have Dersey back. Feel like I'm missing somebody else, but it's interesting there too what you say about Gunther, that he could possibly play before this break here. I know we have 5 games to go, including tonight, but I was kind of curious if he's day to day at this point, if they would maybe push it till after the break just to give him that extra 1-2 weeks of time. But if he can play before the break, that's even better, because once he's in the lineup, obviously we have a far better chance of getting some goals here.
Yeah, I think the stretch is just too critical to not have him. If he's able to go, I think you play him. If they maybe were a couple more points ahead, if it was 2-3 points instead of 6, with Calgary has a game in hand as well, I think maybe you would go, all right, let's give them that extra little bit of time. But no, it's they need points, they need wins, and they need goals. That to me has been kind of one of the bigger issues, aside from an inability to play a complete 60 minutes, whether it's the second period or the third period. That's the problem. They're also not scoring enough. They're not getting enough widespread production. The fact that, even when they won those 3 divisional games, it was Cooley and Gunther and Schmaltz leading the way. You need more depth. You need more guys to get on the scoring sheet. So if you can, now that Sergachev is back, and if you can get Gunther back and maybe Cooley in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and Dersey amongst that same time, those are all guys that can help you offensively and give you that push. So it's a very thin window, but they're still alive. It's not not over yet. But if they can't kind of turn things around here shortly, that summer is going to come earlier than I know both of them want.
Yeah, still very much in the race, right? You look at the teams around them too. Vancouver just lost one of their best players in JT Miller, and I know Calgary added with the pieces they brought in from Philadelphia, but let's see how they fit in the roster first, right? Sometimes you tweak the roster and things get worse. So still very much in the race. We'll see how things go.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that one wild card spot is an option here. And don't forget, Los Angeles is really starting to tumble a little bit, and we don't know what the word is for Kirill Kaprizov, even though the Minnesota Wild seem to just keep on chugging along, even with some of their key injuries. Kind of going back to the offense, a couple stats here that is just kind of interesting. Last season, this team ended 15th for goals for per game and had the 15th ranked power play. Right now, the team is ranked 22nd for goals for, both over the last 10 games played, and they're averaging 2.64 goals for per game over the last 10. And then over the course of the season, they are ranked 22nd as well, with an average of 2.8 goals for per game. The power play has increased to the 11th best in the league over the course of the entire season. And I think that really shows this lack of depth scoring here. Last season, they had 6 20-goal scorers, and if you had counted Gunther for a full season, it would have been 7. We're not seeing that this year. Now, I mean, the good news is we're seeing a lot of improvements with Cooley and Gunther. I would say huge strides in their development. We're seeing some really promising strides in development with some of our defensemen like Kesselring and the Maverick Lamara stint that he had. And I think we can all say that Marino, for his first 9 games played, has been absolutely fantastic. But this has been a team that has always had at least 2 key players out since pretty much the start of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of what we were talking about. I think those numbers, it's not hard to figure out why those numbers are the way that they are. When you look at just, it doesn't shock me that they've dropped, because you have a third line that the entire season has not been able to figure it out. Lawson Krause is down, I believe, close to 60% year over year in terms of production. Nick Bukestad isn't far away from that number, and Michelli's about 52% down in terms of production year over year. And I mean, those were 3 of your top, I think, 6 guys in terms of points last year. And so, especially Michelli, I mean, that guy had the second most assists behind Keller, and I think he was 3rd in points. So it doesn't shock me whatsoever that overall, top to bottom, they've dropped in goals for. You're not getting really any production from a third line. And yeah, third lines aren't necessarily going to produce a whole lot, but
yeah,
they did for Arizona a year ago, and now it's not happening here in Utah. And then in terms of the power play, their power play has gotten much better. It's very dangerous, with Keller and I mean, at their best, Keller and Cooley and Gunther and Sergachev and Schmaltz, those guys, every single one of those guys can put the puck in the net. They have phenomenal chemistry. You have creators, you've got 3, arguably 4 creators, and then 2 or even 3 elite snipers. So yeah, it's like you said, it just shows this team just doesn't have depth. And I think as we continue to move along in the season, that becomes a little bit more obvious, which is why I think they find themselves where they're at. The top 2 lines, when everyone's healthy, very, very good lines. Very good lines. 4th line has been okay. I don't think they're, underperforming, but they're a 4th line in the NHL. They're not. Yeah. They're not going to do a whole lot. It's really that third line that's been an issue, and I think it goes to show how much of an impact it made that you didn't have Marino until about 2 weeks ago, and that you've been without Sean Durzi for 95% of the season. So yeah, teams deal with injuries. It happens all the time in the NHL. Hopefully at some point, it's not key big players that are getting injured for Utah. Not to say that you want anybody injured, but it's just so difficult when it's like, okay, well, we lost our number 2 defenseman at the start of the season, and our number 3 guy was supposed to be ready to go, and now he's not going to be ready until halfway through the year. Okay, we lost our number 2 goaltender. All right, now we lost our star sniper, our leading goal scorer. All right, now we lost arguably the best player on our team in Mikhail Sergachev. Oh, and then this guy whose game is just who is just going through a remarkable evolution in Logan Cooley. Now he's out. So it's just it's tough. This team has really been bit by the injury bug, and with a little bit of underproduction from the third line, I'm not surprised at all that they are where they are.
Yeah, I think that's just it. The offense really has been concentrated from Keller, Schmaltz, Cooley, Gunther when he was healthy. And we mentioned the 620 goal scorers last season in Arizona. And I think coming into this year, Michael Carcone had 20-something goals last year, but I don't think that was the expectation. Bit of a fluke, high shooting percentage, those sorts of things. I think if coming into the year, if we can get 5 goals out of him, that was kind of what his normal benchmark should be. Nick Bukestad was a 20-goal scorer last season. This season, he seems to have lost his step. Pending unrestricted free agent, my guess at this point is he's not back next year. And then Lawson Krause, probably the most disappointing player on the team just in terms of his production, his time on ice. This is somebody who's supposed to be a leader on the team, and at least from an offensive point of view, he's not backing it up with the offense. You look at the salary he's owed, you look at the production. Not only has he been one of the worst players on this team, but he's been one of the worst players in the league.
Yep, for sure. No, you're spot on with all those things. So the end of the day, the way the team's performing, they're getting closer. I think that's kind of the silver lining here is like, okay, look at the top half of the forward. Look at I think the majority of the defense is good too. And, the emergence of Vamelka, and having Ingram as a backup is not a bad thing whatsoever. But it just kind of, I think it's giving you a glimpse of, okay, what areas does this team need to improve upon moving forward? And they're trying to answer those things through the draft, right? With TJ Ginla, Kobo Dwan, Daniel Bode, Simashev, like it's happening. It's going to happen slow. But the growth there is just as high as, the growth potential, I should say, is as high as, I think any team in the league. And I think I'd like to point out too, is I think Josh Doan's been phenomenal.
Yeah, he has.
In his return. He's not going to fulfill the same role as Dylan Guenther. He's not going to score every single night. He's not going to be a point per game type player, but he brings, I think, something very similar to what his dad brought, right? Like he brings a strong presence. His forecheck is phenomenal. He has a nonstop motor. I think a lot of the success of Barrett Hayton has come as a direct result of Josh Doan's hustle and winning extra pucks. And hopefully as well, Hayton, if that guy can continue to progress. I mean, now he's potentially looking like the player they thought he was, when they took him, high draft pick. If he can continue to develop and be a solid, second or third line center for this team, it's a bright future. But it's just tough right now. These are the growing pains, and it's not fun at times. It's frustrating when it looks like, oh man, this team's really close. They're going to do it. They're finally figuring it out. Oh nope, they lose 4 in a row. So it's tough.
That's something we hear Bill Armstrong hit on a lot, right? There's no magic spell to make Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley 24 years old. Logan Cooley's only 20, Dylan Guenther's only 21, and we just have to go through these growing pains in the interim.
Yeah, definitely have to agree there. And, even Barrett Hayton, 5th overall in 2018, he's kind of hitting that age range where you start to get in your prime. You get a little bit more, quote unquote, man strength, and you're kind of seeing it come through in his play, especially as of late. That is an exciting element here, especially because you can kind of see how this team struggles with center depth, especially when you lose somebody like Cooley. And, this is something Corey and I and the rest of the Clean Hits crew have talked about, trying to find maybe an upgrade at 2C while still being able to keep Hayton seems very difficult now that there are 32 teams in the league. You look up and down teams' lineups, and there are not many centers to go around. So finding, a youngish center that would fit in with this kind of core and would still be considered kind of an upgrade may be difficult. So it may have to come internally. And that's kind of why with the season and, with the injuries the team has had, there may be a little bit of a silver lining. I don't want to bring up the T word yet. We aren't going to go down the T route for the draft, but getting another top 10, top 12 pick isn't the worst thing in the world, especially in a kind of a draft that's not too top heavy and has some nice centers and defensemen sprinkled all the way within that kind of top 15 range. But that will be something to discuss a little bit more as we have an idea of how the rest of the season goes. If you love prospect talks, though, you can join us at discord.cleanhitshockey.com. Join our community. We are chit-chatting all dang day there. 5 games between today, which is Sunday, February 2nd, and the Four Nations Faceoff tournament. That means 5 games within a 8-day stretch. This is going to be critical. There are winnable games. St. Louis tonight at home, Philadelphia on Tuesday at home, and then they will go on the road to face the Blue Jackets again on Thursday, the Hurricanes on Saturday, and the Capitals next Sunday before that 2-week break. This feels very critical to at least get 3 wins.
Yeah, you got to win. You got to win these last 2 at home. You got to take 2 points from each of these, so you got to get 4. And then I think if you can get 3 points out of the those road games, because you're playing 2 of the best teams in the National Hockey League. I don't see them winning 2 out of those 3. I could be wrong. They've done well on the road, but I just think over these next 5, you got to manage to get, I think, 7 points. or else you're going to start falling by the wayside. And set yourselves up, help yourselves out. You're getting some guys back from injury. You're getting a 2-week break essentially. Get healthy, stay in the race, get these players back, and really give yourselves a chance to make a legitimate push.
Yep, completely agreed. Well, Cole, thank you so much for joining the show. We always appreciate it. We always love chatting with you as well. I hope you have a fun time at the game tonight, and we'll catch you real soon, all right?
Okay, I'll go vote for Mammoth one more time. How about
Perfect.
that?
Yeah. And if you want to vote for me and Corey too, see if you're allowed to, which way we're going.
Just hit all the stations. They would never be able to stop me.
Yeah, but we don't need any voter fraud, hoopla on this. I know how important it is up there, so maybe we'll just keep it nice and clean, if you will, and allow you to just submit the one vote. All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Yep.
Thank you.
See ya. Well, besides all the excitement with the team name that I'm sure is going to be the talk of the town and all the buzz in Salt Lake City for a while, we do want to talk a little bit about these 5 games that are happening today, February 2nd, all the way till next Sunday, before that 2-week break for the Four Nations Faceoff. I feel like every couple episodes we talk about how pivotal a stretch of games is, but this one's probably going to have implications of which direction the team will be going in the trade deadline. Of course, do need to take a little quick pause to give us some of our own pats on the back. You are listening to Clean Hits Hockey, the podcast. We have cleanhitshockey.com where you can find all of our written content. We have a brand new Clayton Keller t-shirt, Mr. Versatile. We'll be doing some giveaways before that Four Nations face off, so be sure to be following us on our Twitter account as well. Love that Mr. Versatile t-shirt, by the way. That one was a very great design by Kenny. Kind of capitalize on that Four Nations face-off snub that happened for Clayton Keller. So be sure to check that out at shop.cleanhitshockey.com. But this 5-game stint kicks off tonight against the St. Louis Blues, who the team defeated just about a week and a half ago, 4-2. We do know that Clayton Keller loves playing against his hometown team, the Blues. And Nick Schmaltz is riding a pretty big point streak. I think he has a point in 9 of his last 10 games, if I remember correctly. Let me pull that up. But I think this could be a tone setter. Again, they will only have one more home game against Philadelphia after today before they hit the road. So kind of thoughts on tonight's game and that second game against Philly on Tuesday.
Pivotal, right? Going into the St. Louis game, they are, I believe it's 1 point behind us in this Western Conference playoff chase. That last spot right now held by, I believe it's Calgary. Vancouver's still very much in the mix. Those teams have made some moves ahead of the trade deadline here. And like you mentioned, Clayton Keller, he has not scored more points against any other team than he has against his hometown St. Louis Blues. And you look at Clayton Keller since the U.S. put out his Four Nations roster on December 4th. He is 9th in scoring in the whole league since that stretch. He's 7th in points per game. So if you're going to bet on a player going into this game, it might make sense to bet on Clayton Keller.
Yeah, and over the last 6 games against the Blues, Keller had 4 just this past game that happened about a week and a half ago. He had a point against them back in November, a point against them November 2023, and then 5 more points in the other previous 2 games. So if I do math well, which I do not, that would be 9, 10, 11 points in his last 5 games against the St. Louis Blues, which is pretty impressive. Schmaltz, as kind of mentioned, is on a pretty good looking point streak here. He has 9 points in his last 10 games, including 2 multi-point games. He has a point in 9 of his last 10 home games. He has a point in 72% of all home games this season. And, he gets a little bit of the beneficiary of that Keller beatdown against the Blues because he has a point in 6 of his last 6 games against them, including a 4-point game and a 2-point game as well. And I thought Schmaltz was probably the best player in that Columbus game. He was really, really hungry for a goal and really, really hungry for a win. And I felt like you could really feel that from him we've kind of talked about Schmaltz before. When he's motivated, he is one outstanding player. And right now, him and Keller with Cooley and Gunther out are going to have to pick up a little bit of the slack with the offense. As Babgley mentioned, we may be getting Gunther back sooner rather than later, but it'll be pivotal tonight for that top line to be able to be productive. And hopefully we can get a little bit of depth scoring to just kind of close up that shot.
And hopefully get a bit of a point streak going here. 6 points out of the playoffs. If they can get this game against St. Louis, they have a Flyers team at home in Salt Lake City. Philadelphia, like Utah, is currently out of the playoffs right now. So going against a weaker team, going into Columbus later this week, you would think, in the back of their mind, they know that they need to play the full 60 against Columbus, given what just happened the other night. I think they then have Carolina, which that's probably going to be the toughest one of this trip. We saw Carolina earlier this year in Utah, that 49 save night for Karel Vejmelka. Carolina is a team, especially now, that can win the Stanley Cup with that Mikko Rantanen addition, the Taylor Hall addition. They're a team that likes to fire a lot of pucks at the net, so we're going to have to be ready for that one. But I think a sneaky game on this trip can be when we end it. It is a back-to-back, so I assume the goalies will split those two games, but they're going up against the Washington Capitals, which at that time of that game, they're either going to be first, second in the league. They're second right now. It's going to be a game where it's the last game before the break. The Capitals have no players participating. How crazy is that? One of the best teams in the league.
Wild.
Players in the Four Nations. Capitals might be, minds elsewhere for that game, right? It's the last game before the break. We do that a lot usually every year before the All-Star break. Players are thinking different things. They're thinking what they're going to pack to go to Cabo. So maybe we can pull one over on the Capitals in that game and get maybe 2 points that we otherwise would not get.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Now, here's a little crazy stat for that road trip out of Columbus, Carolina, and Washington. We have the top ranked goals for per game at home team, the second ranked goals for per game at home team, and the fifth ranked goals for per game at home team. Who's number 5?
From those three teams? I feel like historically we have not got a lot of goals in Carolina, so that would be my guess.
Goals for, not goals against.
Okay.
So top offenses.
Like who we've scored the most goals against of those three teams?
No. In the league in general, these teams are ranked 1, 2, and 5 for goals scored at home per game over the course of the entire season. Who is number 5 here?
I would say Columbus.
Okay. How about 2?
It's hard to say. Carolina has so much depth. And then you look at Washington, and I mean, they do have Ovechkin, but he was still leading the team in goals, even despite missing the 15, 16, whatever game it was with the leg injury. So, but they are right at the top of the league. I'm going to say Washington's second, and I'm going to put Carolina as the best at home because that Carolina arena is just insane. So I'm going to think they're number 1 at home.
Well, you got an F.
Okay. All wrong?
All wrong.
Okay, there.
Number 5 is Washington.
Okay.
Number 2 is Carolina.
Wow, Columbus is first. Okay.
Columbus, not only are they first, they are averaging 4.16 goals for per game played at home. Carolina at the number 2 spot is 3.81.
So they got a good little margin there, too. It's all like cannon in Columbus. The players love to hear the cannon go off.
Yep. Kind of a wild turnaround for that team. And, watching them the other night, you kind of get a vision of maybe what general manager Bill Armstrong is building here in Utah. Some high-skilled players kind of mixed in with some big grit, some big, larger, bulkier bodies as well, with some nice puck-moving defensemen. Nice team play kind of all around. Some nastiness, too, on that team. It's going to be interesting to see if we kind of mirror that build. I mean, you got kind of like the Marchenko and Dylan Gunther comparisons or kind of mirrored play, if you will. Voronkov could be very similar to a Daniil Boot down the road. Kent Johnson kind of has that Keller flash with his skill. And Adam Fantilli, while he may be, maybe nearly a foot taller than Cooley, they both have that kind of tenacity and two-way play around the net. Pretty interesting to see the development of what's happened in Columbus. So that is going to be a very, very dangerous game on this road trip to kick it off. I mean, if we hopefully have Gunther back to be able to compete with that type of firepower, either that or we're going to have some ace team defense and goaltending for all three of those road trip games here.
I mean, that Columbus team could be a bit of a look to the future for us because he's not the general manager anymore, but Jarmo Kekalainen built a lot of that team with his draft selections. Yeah. And there's a connection there with Bill Armstrong because Jarmo Kekalainen used to be the head of scouting in St. Louis before Bill Armstrong took over that role. Bill Armstrong was an amateur scout under Jarmo in St. Louis, and they built a cup winner there. And, you know, the foundation is there in Columbus where they're not going to win the Stanley Cup this year, but there's a lot of good, young, promising pieces there.
Yep, agreed. Now, right after the Four Nations tournament break, it will be, let me see here, February 22nd. It will be the next game after that 2-week-long break against the Kings. And then with a little bit of a homestand, a 4-game homestand after that game, which will lead us pretty much right into the March 7th trade deadline. I think these 5 games and a little bit of those games after the break are going to really determine if this team is a seller, a buyer, or just kind of the holding. Any thoughts of what your expectations would be for the Utah Hockey Club right now, or is it too hard to say, or what are you thinking? Tweaks, big moves, what?
Yeah, it's hard to say because we are still very much in that playoff mix. I know it's 6 points, but you just got to string a couple of games together and you're right back in the mix. You look at the New York Islanders and what they're doing right now. They've won 7 in a row. I think Detroit's won 6 in a row. Detroit's won something like 13 or 14 games since Christmas, and they've got themselves back in the mix. I think we can do the same, right? We just have to be able to close the games. If we had gotten that extra point against Pittsburgh, if we had gotten that extra point against Columbus, then we're only 4 points out of playoffs instead of 6. Yep. That's 2 wins, right? Going toward the deadline, we have a couple of players who could be moved out for draft picks. Ian Cole, Alex Kerfoot, Nick Bukestad, all pending unrestricted free agents. But you also have to balance that against, if you take them out of the lineup, then what does that do for the team for the rest of the year? Is it worth getting a 3rd-round pick if the team's just going to lose out? Or do you take the value of just having those veterans around, keep them, forget about the picks? I mean, we already have so many picks. We were hearing insiders like Frank Saravelli saying this team has too many picks that they know what to do with. So they're going to get to a point here where it's going to be another Sergachev-style trade where they're bundling up 3-4 assets for one serious upgrade. You know, you look at the rumors, and we were in the mix there for Elias Pettersson poking around. Obviously, it looks like he's kind of taken off the trade board for now with JT Miller getting moved back to New York, but would be curious if we're looking at alternatives beyond Elias Pettersson to really solidify that, not even a second-line center, but to have almost kind of 2 first-line centers, right? Logan Cooley, if he's not one already, he will be very soon. And if we can add another, not necessarily a bad thing to have 2 number 1 centers. I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins won a handful of Stanley Cups out of it. So definitely a recipe for success.
Yeah, and Ken mentioned earlier that when you go through all the team lineups right now, it's really hard to shake loose centers, and finding kind of what I would call a quote-unquote upgrade of somebody like Barrett Hayton, who's been playing phenomenal this month. You know, it's difficult to try to pinpoint that type of player that fits in with this age range of a group and kind of play style. So, yeah, having landed Elias Pettersson would have been wild to have that 1-2 punch of 2 kind of 1Cs down the middle. But of course, you know, you're going to have to give to get, or you're going to have to get to give rather here. And, you know, that could have been one of those things that down the road, the prospect pool could have looked a little bit thinner, or kind of our depth players would have been kind of used for that type of trade. I'm not even totally sure what that package could have looked like, but never know. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Vancouver in this next stretch of games. Now that JT Miller has been moved, if there's no improvements, you got to wonder if maybe they do decide to kind of pull the plug and see what they can get for Elias Pettersson, and maybe kickstart a little bit of a retool, rebuild with kind of a generational prospect in McKenna coming up too. So I think there'll be a lot of teams that may make some moves that you weren't expecting them to when push comes to the shove here. But should be interesting to see, again, if there's more tweaks, big moves, big sells, And again, I think these 5 games will give us some more clarity, and we will be sure to be putting out that type of content during that Four Nations break, because I know we're all going to be really bored, twiddling our thumbs, wondering what to do. So make sure you are subscribed to all of our outlets at Clean Hits Hockey. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, of course, our Discord at discord.cleanhitshockey.com, Instagram, Twitter. Come join the fun. We're having a lot of fun in that Discord. Game day threads, prospect threads, lots of great ways to learn more about the team and meet other people who are as excited about the Utah Hockey Club as you are. Give us a like, a subscribe, a comment. All of that seriously helps. Otherwise, that's all I got. How about you, Corey?
Let's go Utah. Big 2 points on the board tonight against St. Louis.
Yep, agreed. So buckle up.
Let's go Mammoth.
Yes, we got a mammoth of a 5-game slate coming up. Tusk up.
Tusks up.
All right. Adios, everybody.
We know we running it now. Watch the game change.